Welcome. Tonight we drift back to the hills of Tuscany, where the sun leans softly across fields that smell of wild herbs and wet soil. You walk along a narrow dirt path, cicadas humming in the tall grass, and see a boy kneeling by a stream, watching how water curls around a pebble. His hands are muddy, his eyes wide and alive with questions he doesn't yet know how to ask. This is Leonardo, a child born outside of marriage to a notary and a peasant girl, in the little town of Vinci. His world is simple but filled with wonder. The air is warm, the sky huge, and everything seems like a mystery to be solved. You watch him pluck a leaf from a tree, turn it over, and sketch its veins in the dirt with a stick. He notices how light falls, how birds fold their wings, how shadows bend. Even now, before he can read or write, he's already seeing the world differently. People in Vinci whisper that he's odd, always distracted, lost in thought, but his grandfather just laughs and says the boy's mind is always somewhere else. You pass through his small homestone walls, the smell of oil lamps, tools scattered about. He uses anything he can find to draw: charcoal, bits of chalk, even the soot from a candle. He sketches animals, faces, storms. His curiosity never stops. He dissects lizards to see how they move, builds tiny bridges from twigs, and makes simple water wheels to see how motion works. Historians still argue whether his mother Caterina stayed in his life or vanished early on, but they agree that his childhood was one of observation more than play. You notice that he doesn't seem lonely. His companionship comes from the natural world. He studies how light flickers off a pond and how air moves through leaves. That quiet fascination, that constant noticing, is the seed of everything he'll become. The world around him is full of superstition, but Leonardo believes in proof. You can almost hear his thoughts. What if I can find how things truly work, not just how they're said to work? He watches a bird swoop low over the hills and wonders what holds it up there. Not angels or magic, something else, something he can understand. One evening you stand beside him under a violet sky. He dips his fingers into wet clay and molds the shape of a human face. The details are striking to real for a boy his age. His father, seeing this, takes the model to Florence one day. Soon, the boy who played with mud and shadows will step into a city buzzing with color, art, and possibility. In Vinci, Leonardo is just another curious child. In Florence, he will become a student, an apprentice, a spark in the storm of the Renaissance. But for now, you breathe in the scent of rosemary and smoke, and watch him lying in the grass, gazing up at birds. Somewhere deep in his chest, a question forms, one that will never leave him. How does everything fit together? A lesser-known fact slips in quietly. As a child he was left-handed, something considered unlucky then. To keep his pages clean he wrote from right to left, forming the mirrored script that would later fill thousands of pages. Maybe it began right here, in this little town where he tried to hide his messy hands from the lamp's smoke. As night falls, you see fireflies glowing between the trees. Leonardo reaches out to catch one, studying its small light like it's a secret sent from the stars. His world is small, but his mind stretches far beyond it, across rivers, over mountains, into the heart of flight itself. He doesn't know it yet, but he's already walking toward a future where imagination and science will share the same breath. The boy of Vinci is growing restless. Soon he will leave the hills behind, carrying with him nothing but a head full of questions and a heart that refuses to stop wondering. You arrive in Florence, where the air hums with sound and color. Bells ring from every direction, voices echo through narrow stone streets, and the smell of paint, bread, and hot iron fills the air. The year is around 1466, and young Leonardo da Vinci is now about 14. He walks beside his father, nervous but wide-eyed, as they approach the workshop of Andrea del Veracol, one of the greatest masters of the time. Inside, it's chaos, but the beautiful kind. You see apprentices grinding pigments into powders, others hammering gold leaf onto wooden frames, and a few carving marbles so smooth it almost looks soft. Paintings half-finished lean against walls. In one corner, a bronze statue stands tall and unfinished, gleaming in the light. This is Verrocchio's world, and Leonardo has just stepped into it. At first, he's just another helper. He sweeps the floor, cleans brushes, and mixes colors, but he watches everything. His eyes follow Verrocchio's every move, memorizing how the master bends light and shadow. When he paints, Leonardo studies the way paint breathes when mixed with oil instead of egg. Soon Verrocchio notices that the boy isn't just watching, he's understanding. One day Verrocchio begins a new work, a painting called The Baptism of Christ. Leonardo is allowed to help with one small detail, an angel on the side. You stand behind him as he works, and it's almost eerie how alive the angel's face becomes. When the painting is finished, some say the master himself put down his brush, declaring that his student had surpassed him. Historians still argue whether that story is true, but the painting itself remains a quiet reminder that talent sometimes overtakes even the teacher. Days in the workshop stretch long. Leonardo learns everything: how to mix pigments from minerals, how to cast bronze, how to carve, how to draw anatomy. He sketches constantly, sometimes on scraps of paper, sometimes directly on the walls. You see him drawing a horse, then a child, then a machine that seems too strange for its time. His curiosity spills into everything he touches. He studies how light changes through glass jars filled with water, how curls of smoke rise and twist, how muscles tense in the arm of a worker lifting stone. To him, art and science are the same. Beauty is simply truth, seen clearly. There's a little-known story whispered among apprentices. Leonardo once sculpted a small clay head so lifelike it frightened them. Verrocchio is said to have laughed and called him the little demon of art. Leonardo didn't mind. He smiled, wiped his hands, and went back to work, already thinking of how to make stone seem to breathe. The city outside is changing fast. Florence is a place of thinkers, poets, and dreamers, ruled by the Medici family. The streets are crowded with merchants, scholars, and travelers bringing news from distant lands. Leonardo walks those streets at night, studying the play of lantern light on wet stone, listening to the sound of lute spilling out from taverns. He draws faces in the margins of his notebooks, ordinary people, each with some detail that fascinates him, a crooked smile, a tired gaze, a scar. He doesn't just want to paint what he sees. He wants to understand why it looks that way, why eyes glimmer when wet, why a smile fades unevenly, why shadows soften in the corners. He fills notebooks with questions and answers written backward, mirrored, perhaps so others won't read them, or maybe just because it feels natural. You can almost feel his growing confidence. The shy boy from Vinci is gone, replaced by a young man with a strange, quiet certainty. He's still humble in Verrocchio's presence, but at night he dreams of his own projects. He sketches an angel that seems to hover, a bridge that could span any river, a machine that could fly. Still, he keeps many of his thoughts private. He knows the church frowns on too much curiosity. Some ideas are safer left in the pages of his notebooks. Historians still debate whether he ever showed Verrocchio his early designs for flying machines, but it is clear even now that his imagination was reaching far beyond what his world could build. You watch him finish another long day in the studio. His hands are stained with paint, his clothes dusted with marble. He leans over a small candle, sketching quietly as everyone else sleeps. On the table there's a small figure. He's carved a horse mid-gallop, muscles alive, mane frozen in motion. It's only wax, but it feels as if it might move. Outside, Florence glows under a pale moon. The Arno River flows silently, and somewhere in the distance, church bells mark the hour. Leonardo steps to the window, his mind restless. He's no longer just an apprentice. He's a man beginning to see that art can hold all of life inside it: motion, light, knowledge, faith. He doesn't yet know that he'll soon grow impatient with painting alone. His hands, his mind, want more. Machines, anatomy, water, the stars. He wants to learn it all. But for now, in this golden moment, he belongs to Florence, the city that shaped him, the workshop that taught him how to see, and the master who unknowingly unleashed the greatest artist-engineer the world would ever know. You find yourself standing in a quiet corner of the workshop. Paintings lean against the walls, unfinished, their faces half-formed, their skies still pale and empty. Leonardo paces slowly between them, brush in hand, eyes distant. Years have passed since he first arrived here. He is no longer the young boy from Vinci, but a man whose name whispers through Florence as both brilliant and strange. He has become known for his beauty, his kindness, and his refusal to rush. He begins many things: paintings, sketches, designs, but he finishes few. Some call him unreliable, others say he's haunted by perfection. When he works, he paints layer after layer so thin it's almost invisible, building softness from shadow until the skin of a figure looks alive. Yet, just when the work nears completion, he stops. His mind leaps to something new, a new idea, a new question, another mystery to chase. You watch him standing before a large wooden panel, the adoration of the Magi. It's a swirl of movement horses, faces light, and it's magnificent, even half. But Leonardo sets down his brush and turns away. Historians still argue why. Some say he grew restless, others that the work itself overwhelmed him. Maybe he felt that no painting could ever hold what he saw in his mind. He starts another. St. Jerome in the wilderness, the figure's gaunt face, the bones under the skin, the loneliness, it all feels so real. Yet again, he stops, leaving it incomplete. A pattern begins to form. Perfection isn't his goal anymore, understanding is. At night you see him hunched over parchment instead of canvas, his notebooks filled with sketches of muscles, animals, water currents, and the strange spirals of hair. He writes backward, as always, filling the pages with thoughts that move from poetry to mechanics to anatomy in the same breath. It's as if his mind refuses to stay in one place. People around him don't know what to make of it. Florence is a city of painters, yet Leonardo seems half scientist, half philosopher. When someone asks why he studies so much, he smiles and says, "To know how to paint the soul, one must understand everything else." There's a small, almost forgotten detail about him during these years. He often bought caged birds at the market, not to keep, but to set free. You imagine him holding the fragile creature in his hands, whispering something softly before opening his palms. Maybe that love for motion, that need to see things fly, was already becoming a quiet obsession. The Medici court begins to take notice of him. He attends gatherings where musicians play and thinkers debate the nature of beauty and truth. Leonardo listens more than he speaks. He sketches faces lit by candlelight, jotting down notes about how laughter wrinkles the eyes or how sadness folds the mouth. Still, his restlessness grows. Florence is full of artists, each one fighting for commissions. Botticelli paints flowing figures of myth. Ghirlandaio fills churches with saints. Leonardo feels confined, his ideas stretched far beyond paint and plaster. He wants to build, to experiment, to solve. He begins to design machines that no one asks for: gears, bridges, cranes, even ideas for flight. People see him carrying rolls of drawings, whispering to himself. Some call him eccentric, others a dreamer. But you can sense that he's on the edge of something new. Historians still debate what drove him to leave Florence around 1482, but one theory stands out: he wanted a new challenge. So he writes a letter to Ludovico Sforza, the Duke of Milan, offering his services not as a painter, but as an engineer and inventor of machines of war and peace. The letter lists what he can build: bridges, cannons, catapults, armored vehicles, and only at the end does he mention he can also paint. You picture him packing up his belongings: sketchbooks, a few brushes, small tools, and endless dreams. He leaves behind half-finished paintings, a few loyal friends, and the city that first shaped his vision. The road ahead will lead him to Milan, a place of music, politics, and danger, where his imagination will finally find the freedom it craves. Before he leaves, he takes one last walk along the Arno River. The air smells of rain. He stops to watch how the current curls around a stone, how it breaks and reforms. That small detail will return later in his studies of water, motion, and even the folds of fabric. Everything connects in his mind, and that's his secret. He sees unity in all things. As you walk beside him, the city fades behind you, and the hills open up once more. The young painter who couldn't finish anything is moving toward a world where he'll begin more than anyone could ever imagine. His unfinished works will remain behind, beautiful ghosts of ideas too large to be contained. You follow Leonardo north toward Milan, a journey across winding roads and wide plains. The air grows cooler, the language changes, and the city ahead gleams with promise. Milan is ruled by Ludovico Sforza, a man of power, wealth, and ambition. He loves pageantry and innovation, exactly the kind of mind that might understand Leonardo's. When Leonardo arrives, his letter of introduction speaks not of painting but of inventions, machines of war, hydraulic systems, even bridges that fold. You walk beside him as he enters the court, his robes simple compared to the gold-threaded nobles around him. He stands quietly before the Duke, his calm voice describing inventions that sound like magic, cannons that fire without smoke, chariots armored like beasts, machines that can fly. Some say Ludovico hired him out of curiosity, others say out of fascination. Historians still argue what the Duke truly saw in him: a painter or a prophet. The years in Milan become some of Leonardo's richest. His notebooks fill faster than ever. You see sketches of pulleys, water wheels, and gears, each one drawn with the same care as a human face. He builds models of machines to lift stones and drain rivers. He even studies how seeds fall through the air, tracing the spirals with delight. Every motion, to him, is a kind of art. But what fascinates him most is flight. In his chambers, lit by candles, he spends long nights studying birds. He writes that their wings are like living instruments of geometry. You watch him tie bits of parchment together to mimic feathers, testing how air pushes and lifts. He believes the secret to flight lies not in power, but in balance. He fills entire pages with designs for flying machines, ornithopters, gliders, parachutes. One quiet evening, you see him on a hillside outside Milan, holding a small wooden model of wings. He tilts it into the wind, watching how it moves. The sky turns pink and gold, and for a moment, you can almost feel his yearning to lift off, to see the world from above. Of course, he never does. The materials of his time are too heavy, his tools too primitive, but the dream stays alive in his pages, waiting for centuries to come true. A lesser-known detail from these years makes you smile. Leonardo often performed for the court, organizing elaborate festivals and plays. He designed moving sets, flying angels, and even mechanical lions that could walk and open their chests to reveal flowers. The nobles adored him for it. It wasn't just art or science, it was spectacle, imagination brought to life. You wander through his workshop in Milan. Tools cover the tables, alongside models of machines and jars of pigment. A skull rests nearby, drawn over and over with notes about muscles and veins. You realize how his studies never separate. To paint a smile, he studies anatomy. To design a bridge, he studies rivers. To dream of flight, he studies air. For Leonardo, the world is one vast system of patterns. He begins a new painting, The Last Supper, for the refectory of Santa Maria del Grozzi. You stand beside him as he sketches the first outlines. The room smells of plaster and dust. He paints slowly, deliberately, studying each face of Christ's apostles as if he knows them personally. The moment he chooses isn't the calm meal, it's the instant of shock, when Christ says one of them will betray him. Every face reacts differently: fear, confusion, denial. You can almost hear the murmurs through the silence of the room. But he doesn't use the old fresco method, which dries too quickly for his liking. Instead, he experiments with tempera and oil on dry plaster, hoping for richer tones. It works for a time. Then, as the years pass, the paint begins to flake. Historians still argue whether he realized it too late, or simply accepted that impermanence is part of beauty. You watch him pause between strokes, lost in thought. He whispers something to himself about how light changes every second, how truth lives in movement. When he finally steps back, the Last Supper is alive with emotion unlike anything painted before. It's not just a Cinnatus, a pulse, a breath caught in time, but Leonardo's world is never still for long. He continues designing machines for the Duke bridges that unfold, canals that flow backward, and plans for entire cities. He imagines ways to make Milan cleaner and more efficient, sketching streets with upper levels for people and lower ones for waste and water. Sometimes, when the Duke's court grows restless with war and politics, Leonardo withdraws into his notebooks. You see him draw spirals of water, then the curl of a woman's hair, then a siege engine. His thoughts move like rivers, branching endlessly, never settling. In the quiet of night, you can almost hear the scratch of his quill. His candle flickers beside him, the pages spread wide like wings. Around him, the inventions of the future sleep in ink and imagination machines, bridges, wings. He doesn't know that centuries later, others will lift his drawings from obscurity and see in them the foundation of modern science and engineering. For now, in Milan, Leonardo's mind is flying even if his body cannot. He's painting, designing, performing, and dreaming all at once, a man who cannot stop chasing the hidden laws of the world, even when they slip through his fingers like smoke. The court of Milan hums with life, and you walk through it beside Leonardo, feeling the weight of gold, silk, and power pressing in from every direction. Music drifts from open windows, and the aroma of roasted meats and sweet wine fills the corridors. Nobles argue about politics and marriage alliances, while artisans demonstrate their crafts. In this glittering, restless environment, Leonardo moves quietly, observing everything. He is both participant and outsider, admired but never fully part of the court. You watch him at work on projects both grand and intimate. One day he tests a mechanical lion that can walk, lift its paw, and open its chest to reveal lilies. Courtiers gasp and clap, delighted by the illusion of life. Another day he sketches the engineering for a canal system that could redirect rivers and power mills, thinking not only of utility but of beauty. He sketches the water in flowing curves, imagining how it would look and feel if someone were to watch it from a bridge or a boat. Historians still argue whether any of these canal designs were ever built, but the detail in his sketches suggests he envisioned them as vividly as any painting. Amid all this, he continues his explorations of anatomy, often dissecting corpses in secret. You watch him tracing every muscle, every tendon, his pencil gliding over parchment as if revealing a hidden truth. He is fascinated by motion, by how the human body functions like a machine. He measures the length of bones, the curve of the spine, the exact proportions of hands. Some courtiers whisper about his strange habits, but Leonardo never stops. Even his art reflects this obsession. His figures, whether in sketches or grand paintings, seem to breathe and move under his gaze. One little-known fact is that he sometimes invited guests to watch his experiments. Children, nobles, even visiting scholars would gather as he demonstrated water flow or the movement of gears. He would speak softly, pointing to the motion of each wheel or the flight of a small bird, drawing their attention to patterns they might otherwise miss. In these moments, Leonardo's warmth shines through, a gentle teacher revealing the world's hidden order. Despite the grandeur of the court, Leonardo struggles with restlessness. His mind stretches far beyond walls of marble and silk. He writes notes about flight, about how water falls, about how light reflects differently on curved surfaces. Even while designing machines of war at the Duke's request, he dreams of peace and creativity. You can almost hear him muttering to himself, "How can one create when destruction is also demanded?" You follow him into the quiet of his studio. The smell of pigment, linseed oil, and damp paper fills the air. He is sketching new designs for a flying machine, balancing wings with the precision of a bird. He flips through previous sketches, comparing feathers to gears, airflow to motion. You notice his sketches of humans interacting with machines, suggesting a world where art and engineering coexist seamlessly. The Duke, fascinated by Leonardo's intellect and versatility, commissions paintings alongside engineering projects. One such commission is the famous equestrian statue of Francesco Sforza. You watch Leonardo measure, mold, and plan, calculating every angle and proportion. He even experiments with clay and wax models, studying how light and shadow fall across the surface. Yet, history remembers the statue as unfinished, melted down during war, a casualty of time and circumstance. In quieter moments, you notice Leonardo's habits. He keeps birds and small animals around his workshop, studying their motion and behavior. He records every detail, not for display, but for understanding. Even when nobles demand marvels and entertainments, he focuses on observation. He is never merely performing. He is learning, always. As the sun sets, You walk with him along the castle walls. The light spills across the city, the canals reflecting orange and gold. Leonardo pauses, sketching the view, noting the way water ripples and bends around stone, the curve of towers, the flutter of birds. He seems to measure not only the physical world but the emotional, capturing a feeling, a movement, a fleeting gesture. The court continues its endless cycle of politics and display. But Leonardo inhabits a different plane. He is both part of it and removed, a mind always reaching beyond immediate tasks. Every invention, every painting, every sketch is part of a larger pursuit, understanding the harmony between humans, machines, nature, and art. He is at once entertainer, engineer, painter, and philosopher, navigating the glittering halls of power while his imagination soars beyond them. Historians still argue whether his time in Milan was more about creation or survival, balancing patron demands with personal obsession. You sense that both are true. Here, in the splendor and pressure of the court, Leonardo's restless brilliance finds the space to flourish. But even amid all these wonders, he dreams of more: the sky, the flow of water, the movement of living things, and the eternal question of how to capture it all. You can almost hear the distant clang of hammers as Leonardo turns his attention to projects of war. Milan is a city under constant threat, and the Duke demands weapons, fortifications, and innovations for defense. You walk beside Leonardo as he sketches designs for armored vehicles shaped like enormous tortoises, machines with spiked wheels, and siege engines capable of moving against city walls. Each one is precise, meticulously calculated, and, in the mind of the inventor, almost alive. The irony is that Leonardo himself is not a soldier. He studies anatomy, light, and flight, yet here he is designing instruments of destruction. Historians still argue whether he ever truly wanted these machines built, or whether they were exercises in imagination, demonstrations of what could be, not what should. You watch him turning a small model in his hands, observing how gears and pulleys could convert human effort into motion. There is a fascination in mechanics itself, detached from the consequences of war. He also experiments with protective architecture. You wander through plans for walls that curve like waves, moats that double as gardens, and gates that could withstand battering rams. He measures angles, tests the stress on wooden beams, and records every detail in precise mirrored script. A quill scratches tirelessly on paper, diagrams spreading across table after table, a universe of potential just waiting to be realized. Yet not all his war projects come to fruition. Many are left as sketches or small-scale models, never constructed. You can see frustration in his eyes, a mind that desires creation but is constrained by politics, materials, and reality. Sometimes he leaves a design incomplete, moving on to observe water, light, or anatomy, the unfinished work serving as both practice and meditation. In the midst of all this, he continues observing life. You see him outside, examining birds in flight or a horse's gait, comparing movement to his machines. One little-known fact is that Leonardo sometimes built small automata, mechanical figures that could move and even bow. They entertained nobles, yes, but they were also studies in motion, a way for him to test physics and anatomy simultaneously. Despite the weight of war, his notebooks reveal a quiet, playful side. He writes notes about water flowing in canals, the spiral of a snail shell, the structure of clouds. He studies the way sunlight filters through leaves, capturing these moments with sketches that seem almost incidental beside plans for catapults. You realize that Leonardo's mind never rests. Even when creating for destruction, he is always returning to observation, curiosity, and wonder. You follow him into a dimly lit room where he is dissecting a horse to study musculature. The smell of straw and dampness fills the air, the quiet interrupted only by the scratch of pencil on paper. Each tendon, each muscle, is traced with care, as if revealing the secret of life itself. These studies inform not just his machines, but also his paintings. The figures he later renders will move with the same precision and grace he observes in living creatures. Even as he designs machines of war, there is a moral tension that shadows him. Leonardo rarely speaks of it, but you can sense it in the careful way he handles each design, imagining possibilities rather than destruction. He sketches with precision but does not condone violence. Some historians argue that this duality, creating tools of death while seeking knowledge and beauty, defines the paradox of his genius. You watch him pause at a window, looking out over the city. Soldiers march below, carts rattle across cobblestones, and the water in the moat glimmers under the late afternoon sun. Leonardo's gaze drifts upward, past rooftops to the sky, where birds glide effortlessly. He returns to his notebook, sketching wings that might carry a human aloft, not to kill, but to understand flight itself. The juxtaposition is striking. Around him war hums in his mind. Life, motion, and discovery flourish. His genius is restless, stretching beyond the confines of courtly expectations and political necessity. He moves between creation and destruction, between observation and invention, leaving behind sketches, models, and ideas that will inspire centuries. In these moments, you feel that Leonardo is not just a man of his time, he is a traveler through possibility, a mind unwilling to settle for the ordinary. You follow Leonardo back to Florence, a city that feels both familiar and changed. Streets that once seemed narrow now teem with new artists, new patrons, and a restless energy that hums through every stone. You notice the Arno River again, its surface reflecting the pale light. And you remember the boy who first watched water curl around a pebble. That curiosity never left him. Now, it fuels every brushstroke, every sketch, every mechanical drawing. He sets up a small studio in a quiet courtyard. The walls are lined with sketches of anatomy, machines, and landscapes. You watch him studying the light on a vase, the curve of a woman's neck, the way fabric folds across a shoulder. Each observation is meticulous, each line precise. He begins his most famous painting yet, the Mona Lisa. You see him capturing something beyond mere likeness, a sense of inner life, a flicker of thought behind her eyes. Historians still argue whether her smile is meant to convey joy, melancholy, or a secret only Leonardo understood. In Florence, Leonardo rediscovers his love for natural phenomena. He studies rivers, noting how water flows around rocks, how currents twist and turn. He climbs hills to observe storms, tracing lightning in his sketches, recording its branching patterns. You see him crouched over a notebook in the rain, pencil moving with determination, capturing the energy of the sky on paper. Alongside his studies, he continues dissecting human and animal bodies. You watch him carefully tracing muscles, bones, and organs, fascinated by the patterns that repeat across creatures. His notebooks are filled with overlapping sketches, a bird's wing next to a human arm, a fish fin beside a hand. Every observation is a clue to motion, balance, and proportion. Some of his contemporaries find these habits strange, even unsettling, but to Leonardo, they are essential to understanding life itself. He experiments with painting techniques, layering oils and glazes to achieve softness and depth previously unseen. Small details, a fingertip, a strand of hair, a glint in the eye, become subjects of endless study. A lesser-known fact is that he often painted for months without showing his work, waiting for colors to dry, then altering shadows and highlights until they satisfied him. The result is art that seems almost alive, as if the subjects might breathe if you stared long enough. Rivalries simmer quietly in Florence. Michelangelo, young and ambitious, begins carving David, and whispers of competition reach Leonardo's ears. Yet you notice he does not engage in petty quarrels. Instead, he observes, learns, and continues his work. He knows that greatness is measured not by rivalry but by the depth of one's understanding and the reach of one's imagination. You see him designing machines for fun, sketching intricate bridges and devices that may never be built. He measures water flow, experiments with pulley systems, and calculates trajectories. Every discovery, small or large, feeds into his art, his understanding of human anatomy, and his conceptions of motion. In the quiet evenings, he strolls Florence's streets. The smell of fresh bread mingles with the river. Lanterns flicker along alleyways, and children play in the fountains. Leonardo observes, always observing. Faces, gestures, and movements are recorded in his mind and in hidden sketches, quietly forming the foundation for his paintings, inventions, and scientific studies. Historians still argue whether his focus on perfection caused delays in commissions, or whether it was a deliberate pursuit of understanding. Perhaps both are true. You can feel the restlessness in him, the need to master not only what can be seen but what can be imagined. Every line, every brushstroke, every note in his notebooks is a step toward capturing the world in its fullness. By nightfall, you see him in his studio, candlelight flickering across unfinished works. The Mona Lisa's faint smile takes shape, her eyes glimmer with thought, her hands poised gracefully. Outside, the city sleeps, but Leonardo's mind remains awake, tracing patterns in the water, the clouds, and the human form. Florence is alive, but so is his vision, reaching far beyond the city's walls, into a world he is still discovering, one observation at a time. You sense the tension in Florence as Leonardo navigates a world full of talent, ambition, and subtle rivalry. Michelangelo has carved his David, a figure of perfect proportion and force, and the city hums with admiration. You notice Leonardo watching from a distance, contemplative, a faint smile on his lips. He does not let envy control him. Instead, he channels it into observation, into study, into the quiet refinement of his own genius. Historians still argue how much these rivalries influenced his later works, but you can see that he draws strength from them rather than despair. You follow him into quiet workshops, gardens, and streets where he sketches everyday life. A baker bends over a tray of bread. A child chases a rolling hoop. A merchant lifts a sack of grain. Leonardo's eyes capture the precise angle of muscles, the curve of a smile, the tension in a shoulder. Every detail is stored in his mind and notebooks, ready to inform paintings, sculptures, or inventions. Some of these sketches will never be completed, but they reveal his ceaseless curiosity and the breadth of his observation. He continues to explore anatomy, often inviting assistants to help him with dissections. You stand beside him as he traces the curves of muscles, the alignment of bones, and the delicate arrangement of veins. You notice his reverence for the body, a sense that understanding flesh and motion is as essential as understanding art or mechanics. A lesser-known fact is that he even experimented with prosthetics, designing artificial hands and arms that anticipate modern engineering by centuries. In the midst of this, Leonardo's fame grows. Patrons from across Italy and beyond seek his paintings, sketches, and ideas. You can hear whispers in workshops, markets, and salons. He is not just a painter, not just an engineer, but a genius of all things. Yet he remains quietly elusive, never fully satisfied with completed works, always chasing the next discovery. You follow him as he steps into a garden, his notebooks tucked under his arm. He observes the growth of plants, the patterns of vines, and the symmetry of flowers. Even the mundane fascinates him. Every leaf, every curve, every shadow is a lesson in proportion and harmony. Some scholars debate whether his botanical studies were purely aesthetic or part of his broader understanding of natural laws. But you sense that for Leonardo, such distinctions do not matter. All knowledge flows together. He also experiments with perspective in ways that few can see. In paintings and sketches, he layers depth, shadow, and light to create the illusion of life and space. Figures seem to emerge from the canvas, responding to unseen forces. You notice the care he takes with hands, eyes, and gestures, elements that make a painting speak as if it breathes. Yet he does not seek recognition for all his efforts. Many works remain unfinished, notebooks remain unpublished, and inventions remain on paper. The quiet frustration is part of his genius. He understands that the act of creation is as important as the outcome, that pursuit is itself a form of immortality. Sometimes, you see him pause and write observations in backward script, a habit that remains peculiar to him. Perhaps it is to preserve secrets, perhaps it is habit. Either way, it signals a mind always thinking, always processing, always moving beyond the immediate. In these years, you notice his social interactions are careful and deliberate. He befriends scholars, nobles, and fellow artists selectively. He avoids conflict where possible. Yet he observes everything, storing information and impressions that will later inform his work in art, engineering, and science. He seems to inhabit both the public world and the private realm of ideas, moving fluidly between the two. As evening falls over Florence, you stand with him overlooking the city. The Arno glows under fading light, towers cast long shadows, and the streets are quieting. Leonardo's gaze lifts to the sky, noting cloud patterns, the trajectory of birds, the subtle shift of light. Even amid rivals, fame, and expectation, his mind remains restless, reaching for knowledge and understanding that stretches far beyond any city, any court, any single life. You follow Leonardo to France, arriving in a gentle, rolling countryside under the reign of King Francis I. The king's court is different from Milan or Florence, less intense, more contemplative, yet alive with art, music, and ideas. You watch Leonardo, older now, his hair silvered, moving with a quiet dignity. He carries his notebooks, sketches, and a few treasured paintings. His reputation has preceded him, and the king welcomes him with warmth and curiosity. In Amboise he settles into a modest chateau overlooking the Loire River. The air smells of river mud, blooming flowers, and baked bread. You notice him walking along paths lined with tall trees, sketching the way branches twist and leaves flutter in the wind. Even here, far from Florence, his mind never stops. He studies water, birds, and human motion, filling pages with observations that bridge art, engineering, and science. Historians still argue how much of his work was meant for posterity versus immediate practical use, but the notebook suggests a mind always in pursuit of knowledge. You see him receiving visitors, artists, scholars, and nobles, all eager to hear his thoughts or witness his sketches. He demonstrates simple mechanical toys, explains principles of flight, or sketches a horse in mid-gallop sometimes. He quietly instructs young apprentices, letting them observe rather than directly guiding. It's a gentle teaching style, one that encourages curiosity rather than obedience. Even in his later years, he continues painting. He touches up the Mona Lisa, studies her enigmatic smile, and experiments with subtle techniques that add depth and life to the portrait. Some works remain incomplete, but in these fragments, the brilliance of his vision is undeniable. You notice him often pausing, thinking deeply, then sketching some detail, a hand, a shadow, a ripple in water that others might overlook. He also reflects on past inventions. You watch him open old sketches of flying machines, bridges, and war devices. Some he revisits, others he sets aside, leaving them as exercises in imagination rather than execution. A lesser-known fact is that he remained fascinated with human anatomy even in France, sketching bones and muscles, trying to understand motion and balance until his final days. Though he is physically older, his curiosity remains as boundless as ever. You walk beside him in the gardens, listening to birds and observing the play of wind through leaves. He gestures toward patterns in nature, murmuring observations about spirals, currents, and flight. Even here, removed from political pressures, he cannot rest. Understanding is his constant companion. You notice the quiet way he interacts with the king. France's prime admires Leonardo, granting him freedom and resources. Yet Leonardo never seeks fame or luxury. He prefers simplicity at table, light for sketching, and room to let his thoughts wander. His mind is occupied more by questions than accolades. Historians still argue about his final projects. Some suggest he was working on designs for musical instruments or innovative architecture, while others believe he focused on personal reflections, capturing ideas that bridge centuries. What is certain is that he never stops thinking, never stops observing, and never stops dreaming. At night, you see him sitting by candlelight, sketching a bird in mid-flight or tracing the curve of a hand. The river outside reflects the moon, and he pauses to study its ripple patterns, perhaps finding in them the same secrets that governed art, anatomy, and mechanics. His vision stretches across time, a mind mapping the laws of nature and the depth of human expression simultaneously. In these quiet moments, you realize that Leonardo da Vinci, now in his final years, embodies a life devoted to curiosity, observation, and creativity. His thoughts, sketches, and discoveries reach far beyond his lifetime, a testament to the endless human desire to understand, create, and explore. You feel the weight of centuries in the air, knowing that this man, older now, has left a mark that the world will follow long after he is gone. You stand with Leonardo in the soft light of his final days. The French countryside stretches quietly beyond the windows of Amboise, the Loire River winding slowly like a silver ribbon. He is older now, hair white, hands worn, yet still capable of delicate sketches. The world has changed around him, yet his mind remains vivid, restless, and endlessly curious. Even as his body weakens, he keeps sketchbooks close, quills ready, eyes attentive to light, motion, and detail. You notice how he reflects on his life. Past cities, Florence and Milan, the bustling workshops and courts, all seem to pass through him like gentle waves. He revisits sketches of flying machines, anatomical studies, paintings both completed and abandoned, and notes that contain centuries of observation and insight. Historians still argue whether he considered himself primarily an artist, engineer, or scientist, but you can see that these distinctions mattered little to him. For Leonardo, every pursuit was part of a greater tapestry, a search for understanding the unity of all things. He talks quietly, occasionally, to those around him, sharing ideas in whispers, sketching illustrations to make concepts clear. You see him measuring the angle of light through a window, tracing the flow of water in a small basin, and studying the subtle movement of a bird perched nearby. Even now, he marvels at the patterns of nature, at how wind and water shape life, at how the human body bends, stretches, and moves with grace. A little-known fact is that Leonardo sometimes used wax figures to study posture and movement, a practice few knew of and even fewer understood, yet it demonstrates the depth of his relentless curiosity. You follow him as he revisits old works, touching the Mona Lisa's canvas, flipping through the pages of notebooks filled with mirrored writing, sketches of landscapes, and inventive contraptions. You notice how he pauses over unfinished designs, not in frustration, but in quiet appreciation of the act of thinking itself. He seems to understand that ideas, even unexecuted, are alive. In these moments, he reflects on rivalry, fame, and discovery. Michelangelo's sculptures, the commissions of the Medici, the intrigues of Milanese court soul are behind him. Yet he does not dwell on what might have been. Instead, he considers what remains, the impressions, the sketches, the thoughts that will travel beyond his lifetime. Historians still argue whether he sought immortality through art or knowledge, but in your presence, you feel that it is both. He is not lonely. The air is filled with the quiet presence of creation, sketches, models, and ideas that have been companions for decades. You see him pause to admire a simple sunset, tracing the light as it reflects off the river. There is a calm satisfaction in his observation, a gentle acceptance that the pursuit of understanding itself has been the purpose of his life. Even as he nears the end, his curiosity remains untamed. You watch him sketch a bird in mid-flight, study the ripple of water in a basin, and trace the curve of a human hand. Every gesture, every observation, every note captures a mind that refuses to rest, even in quietude. You feel the sense of continuity in his life, the river of experience, observation, and imagination flowing steadily to its conclusion. He lies back, surrounded by sketches and notebooks. You feel the gentle hush of his presence, the culmination of decades devoted to seeing, understanding, and creating. His ideas, scattered across pages and minds, have already begun to ripple into the future. In the final silence, he closes his eyes, a life spent in observation, invention, and art resting at last. You sit quietly beside the life of Leonardo da Vinci, letting the gentle hum of the French countryside seep into your mind. The Loire glimmers in the distance, the air soft with the scent of river water and blooming flowers. Time seems to stretch and slow, folding together decades of creation, observation, and quiet contemplation. You imagine him as he was in his last days, surrounded by sketches, models, and notebooks, each page a fragment of a mind that never stopped wondering. He lived in perpetual curiosity, moving seamlessly between painting, engineering, anatomy, and invention. You can almost hear the soft scratch of his quill as he traced the curve of a leaf, a bird's wing, or a human hand. Even in silence, there is motion, rhythm, and purpose. The pulse of thought echoing faintly like the breeze through a window. His unfinished works are not failures. They are a testament to a life spent chasing understanding rather than closure. As you reflect, you notice the quiet humility behind his brilliance. Despite fame, rivalries, and the weight of expectation, Leonardo sought neither accolades nor permanence. His reward was the act of observation itself, the wonder of discovering patterns, the joy of imagining, the satisfaction of connecting disparate truths into one vision. Every painting, every sketch, every machine was an extension of his fascination with the world. You breathe slowly, following his rhythm, letting his curiosity and gentle humor guide you. The world he left behind is larger, more intricate, and infinitely richer because of him. He reminds you that observation is as valuable as action, that imagination has no boundaries, and that even unfinished endeavors can carry profound beauty. Now, as evening settles and the light softens, you feel a calm assurance. Leonardo's life was a journey of constant attention, wonder, and quiet brilliance. You leave his presence carrying the echo of his vision, a gentle reminder that life is measured not only by what is completed but by what is observed, imagined, and cherished along the way. The river flows, the wind whispers, and you let yourself drift, following the soft, endless curiosity that defined him, letting the quiet of his genius lull you into a peaceful reflection.